محم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم أذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذي هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتعذن لي أن أحبت إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فحبت أمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله العلي الأعلى يخرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماعا مبنية ولا أرضا مدهية ولا فلك ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تعذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله وإنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. فقال لعبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. فقال علي لعبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جميع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فذنا وفعذوا شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال عبي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جميع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله حمه ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غمه ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. فقال علي عليه السلام إذن والله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فعذوا وسعدوا وفي الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على
لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کیلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے، نہ جس کی کوئی مثال ہے، نہ جس کی کوئی نظیر ہے. وہ بے مثال شہنشاہ حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کیلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. حسین روح کائنات ہے، حسین فخر معجزات ہے. خدا نے جس کو مرحبا، خدا نے جس کو مرحبا اے نفس مطمئن کہا. خدا نے جس کو مرحبا اے نفس مطمئن کہا. وہ کربلا کا مصطفیٰ حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کیلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. تڑپ چکی شبیہ مصطفیٰ، حسین ہی مگر ڈٹا ہوا. پسر ہے نوجوان کی، پسر ہے نوجوان کی، اے لاش پہ کھڑا رہا. پسر ہے نوجوان کی، اے لاش پہ کھڑا رہا. وہ یہ خلیل کربلا حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کیلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. اے ہاشمی جواں کیا ہوا، کہاں چلے گئے ہو باوفا. صدائے فاطمہ کی تھی، صدائے فاطمہ کی تھی، حرم میں کوئی بھی نہیں. صدائے فاطمہ کی تھی، حرم میں کوئی بھی نہیں. اکیلا رہ گیا میرا حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کیلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. اپنے خون کا غسل ملا، کفن ہے جس کا خاک کربلا. دفن بہن نہ کر سکی، دفن بہن نہ کر سکی، یہ دھوپ میں پڑا رہا. دفن بہن نہ کر سکی، یہ دھوپ میں پڑا رہا. یہ وہ غریب کربلا حسین ہے. لا الہ الا اللہ محمد رسول اللہ. کلا زوال درس گاہ حسین ہے. صلوات.
بھائی دیگر صلوات. ایک اور نعرے صلوات. جب نوجواں کی لاش نہ پائی حسین نے، جب نوجواں کی لاش نہ پائی حسین نے، ٹھوکر ہر ایک گام پہ کھائی حسین نے، گر کر زمین پہ خاک اڑائی حسین نے، دل تھام کر یہ بات سنائی حسین نے، آنکھوں سے سوچتا نہیں مجھے دل ملول کو، آنکھوں سے سوچتا نہیں مجھے دل ملول کو، اے ظالموں دکھا دو شبیہ رسول کو، جب نوجواں کی لاش. چند بند مرثیے کے فاتحہ. بس 4 بند مرثیے کے. جب حرم قلعہ شیریں کے برابر آئے، جب حرم قلعہ شیریں کے برابر آئے، غل ہوا کعبے سے مولا مائے لشکر آئے، کہا شیرین کے ارمان دلی بر آئے، میرے مولا میرے سلطان میرے سرور آئے، میرے مولا میرے سلطان میرے سرور آئے، نور حق شان خدا قدرت باری دیکھو، جاؤ لوگو میرے آقا کی سواری دیکھو، جن سے روشن ہے مدینہ وہ قمر آتے ہیں، جن کا معدن ہے نجف میں وہ گوہر آتے ہیں، جن کے گھر عرش پہ ہیں وہ میرے گھر آتے ہیں، یہ خبر اس کو نہ تھی نیزوں پہ سر آتے ہیں، کہہ رہی تھی کہ چراغ حرمین آتا ہے، اے مسلمانوں مبارک کے حسین آتا ہے، تھا خیال اس کو کہ چوگرد تو یاور ہوں گے، بیچ میں لشکر اسلام کے سرور ہوں گے، گھوڑوں پہ ناقہ زینب کے برابر ہوں گے، پردہ محمل کا سنبھالے علی اکبر ہوں گے، پردہ محمل کا سنبھالے علی اکبر ہوں گے، وانا محمل تھی نہ حشمت تھی نہ زیبائی تھی، سر شبیر کے ہمراہ بہن آئی تھی، سر شبیر کے ہمراہ بہن آئی تھی، ناگہاں راہ میں برپا ہوا شور ماتم، سن کے منہ فق ہوا دل ہل گئے تھرائے قدم، دیکھنے کو جو گئے تھے حشم شاہ وہ زن و مرد وہ زن و مرد پھرے خاک اڑاتے باہر، سخت بے چین ہوئی طالب آرام حسین، دل یہ انگشت شہادت سے لکھا نام حسین، دل پہ انگشت شہادت سے لکھا نام حسین، دل پہ انگشت شہادت سے لکھا نام حسین، جب حرم قلعہ صلوات
بر محمد والی محمد صلوات. Request for Surah Fatiha for Hussein Ali Wazir, Khairunisa Wazir, Muhammad Ali Muqaddam, Fatima Muqaddam, Riza Dhanji, Hina Wazir, Maryam Wazir, Roshan Ali Juma, Sayyid Afaq Hussain, Afaq son of Sayyid Altaf Hussain, Begum Ashraf Jahan, daughter of Agha Haider Hussain, Sayyid Majid Hussain, son of Sayyid Asghar Hussain, Sayyid Munazzir Hussain, Sayyida Shamim Zehra, Sayyid Manzoor Hussain और तमाम मोमिनीन मोमिनात के लिए सूरह फातिहा. Now, without further ado, may I request Maulana Sheikh Abbas Panju to please come to the podium and address the Mu'mineen Mu'minat. Muhammad Salwat.
Just a little bit closer. Thank you. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء، حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى غاصبي حقوقهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويباب نجاة الأمة، يا غريب الغرباء يا مظلوم كربلاء السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته السلام على من الإجابة تحت قبته السلام على ساكن كربلاء فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي يا سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما أما بعد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد أحبائي, on the basis that yesterday's lecture was a tafsir istidlali of the ayah of Imam within the Quran, tonight the lecture will be more history oriented, and inshallah tomorrow we will return back to a majlis which is istidlali, but istidlali from hadith al-sharif inshallah. You will recall a couple of nights back we had spoken in quite some detail in regards to the women, the men and the children who were taken prisoner from Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham. And we were able to establish that what is mashhur amongst the historians is that the number of people from the family of Ahlul Bayt that were taken prisoner, the number was most likely between 60 to 100. Having said this, tonight, by way of a historical analysis or a historical index, I would like to present to you certain aspects from the biography and the seerah of Sayyidah Fidda. Sayyidah Fidda, who was one of the prisoners that was taken, who was one of the women affiliated with Ahlul Bayt and was taken prisoner from Karbala to Kufa and Kufa to Sham. For tonight's lecture or tonight's majlis, in regards to the seerah and the biography of Sayyidah Fidda, will revolve around 4 points. Number one, her descent and her origins. This is number one, and how she got to Medina. Number two, her distinction in terms of her ilm and her taqwa. Number three, some aspects of the grief and the oppression that she lived through while she was serving in the house of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra alayha salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal faraja. And number four, a particular stance that Sayyidah Fidda took on the days or in the revolution of Ashura on the 11th of Muharram. So the entire ma'yar of this majlis revolves around these 4 points. Beginning in regards to the descent, the origin and the ethnicity of Sayyidah Fidda. Historians are of the opinion, alaykum salam, historians are of the opinion that Sayyidah Fidda, her name was Maymuna. And it is when she eventually migrated to Medina that Rasulullah Ruhi lahul fida wa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam went on to name Sayyidah Fidda, changed her name from Maymuna and gave her the laqab Sayyidah Fidda. Fidda meaning silver. And this was an indication of the purity of her heart and the purity within her akhlaq. In regards to her ethnicity, we have a difference of opinion between historians. You will come and you will find that there is one group of historians, the like of Ibn al-Wardi, within his text, who states that Sayyidah Fidda originated from the land of Nubia. Nubia is a land which covers the region between the north of Sudan all the way till the south of Egypt, an entire strip of land from the borders of Egypt that goes down till Sudan. And certain historians have also included the land of Abyssinia, which is present-day Ethiopia. And you will find in history that the Nubian civilization was a civilization that had a great contribution in regards to the masir of mankind and their contribution towards the African continent. For Ibn Wardi is of the opinion that Sayyidah Fidda was Nubian. She hailed from Ethiopia and from Nubia. She then went on to come and migrate to Medina after the Battle of Khaybar. And how did this migration happen? Because in the early days of Islam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, due to the intense persecution that the early Muslims were facing, Rasulullah sent a contingency of Muslims under the leadership of Ja'far al-Tayyar to then go to Abyssinia. Abyssinia is present-day Ethiopia, the region of present-day Ethiopia. He then went on to present-day Ethiopia, the land of Abyssinia, and the ruler was a ruler by the name of Najashi. It is over here that Ja'far al-Tayyar was able to convince Najashi to provide peaceful asylum to the early Muslims that had migrated from the persecution of the Meccans. And you will find that it is from here that the likes of Ja'far al-Tayyar exerted the utmost effort to convert and to invite the people of Abyssinia to Islam on behalf of Rasulullah, to the extent that historians have mentioned that due to the barakat of Ja'far al-Tayyar and the eloquence of Ja'far al-Tayyar, that al-Najashi, who was the Christian king of Abyssinia, converted to Islam. And he has practiced taqiyya in order to maintain his relationship with the Roman Empire and shared interests with the Roman Empire. But what is mashhur is that he had embraced Islam. It is after the Battle of Khaybar and the victory from the Battle of Khaybar that Ja'far al-Tayyar, the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, returned back to the land of Hijaz from Ethiopia. And it is here that Sayyidah Fidda from Ethiopia was brought back to the land of Medina in this convoy of Ja'far al-Tayyar. She then served as a servant within the house of Sayyidat Nisa'il Alameen. Ibn Wardi is of this perspective, and you will find that a number of the historians agree that Sayyidah Fidda alayha salam came to Medina from the land of Nubia or Abyssinia with Ja'far al-Tayyar. And this point of history there is ittifaq. Where the difference lies is when it comes to the origin of Sayyidah Fidda and her descent. For Ibn Wardi and a number of the ulama from the Amma are of the opinion that she was from Abyssinia. However, when you come back and you look at the works of Alama Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi, Rahmatullah alayh in Biharul Anwar, and you look at the writings of Sheikh Ja'far al-Allama Ja'far al-Naqdi, you will find that they are of the opinion that Sayyida Fidda actually hailed from the subcontinent. And you will find within the writings of Allama Majlisi, he says that Sayyida Fidda originated from Hind. And when you look at the word Hind, which is translated as India, you will find that this is a term that is generally used to signify 4 present-day countries, because at that time the term Hind encompassed the regions of present-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So this entire region of the subcontinent was collectively known as Hind. And you find that the word Hind comes up in the event of Karbala more than on one occasion. One of these occasions when Maulana Abul Fadl al-Abbas Qamar Bani Hashim, when he went into the Maidan, he came to the people and he addressed the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. This is before he went out for jihad. He went and he addressed the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad and he said to them, this is Hussein ibn Ali, قد قتلتم أصحابه وأولاده وقد قتلت أولاده العطش. Thirst has killed the children of Imam al-Hussein. This is Hussein ibn Ali saying that, دعوني, leave me, وأترك الحجاز لكم, leave me and I shall leave the land of Hijaz for you, and we shall go towards the land of Rome or the land of India, the land of Hind. Now this also begins, or from here, the fact that Abul Fadl al-Abbas is making a suggestion to Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in that we will leave the land of Hijaz for you, and even at this point we will migrate towards the land of Hind, gives us some sort of indication that even at that time there was some sort of affiliation with the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and the land of the subcontinent, such that Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and you notice when somebody like Abul Fadl al-Abbas gives an option to the enemies and recommends a place like Hind, you will notice that Abul Fadl, in his capacity as the commander of the army, not only was his job to mobilize the forces on the day of Ashura, but the task of Abul Fadl from the day that this Qafila left Medina until Yawmul Ashir was to secure, or was to guarantee, the security of the women. This was perhaps one of the greatest tasks of Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and one of the greatest masa'ib to fall upon the women on the day of Ashura is when Imam al-Hussein returned back with the flag and the alam of Abul Fadl. One of the ulama say the qalaq is translated as the fear and the anxiety and the panic that the women felt when Abul Fadl Abbas didn't return back is something that is unquantifiable. For when you have somebody like Abul Fadl, who is in charge of the security of the women, recommend or give an option to Umar ibn Sa'ad that let us go, we will go back to the land of the subcontinents, it allows us to understand that there was some Shia affiliation within the subcontinent at that time that gave a person such as Abul Fadl enough confidence to recommend we will take that place as a refuge because our women will be safe in that area. These are points of history that require ta'ammul, and there is research that is underway to try and figure out and connect more dots into what was the relationship between the land of the subcontinent and Ahlul Bayt, particularly during this time period of 60 and 61 AH. For you find that, coming back to our topic, Allama al-Majlisi and Allama al-Naqdi are of the opinion and have been able to establish that Sayyida Fidda was actually from the land of India, and that she was a daughter of the Indian king. What had happened is, at that time, Al-Najashi, who was the king of Abyssinia, had attacked the Indian empire on a number of times, be it for economical reasons or be it also for religious reasons. But there were skirmishes and wars that had taken place between the king of Abyssinia and the king of India. And in one of these wars that had happened, Sayyida Fidda, who was one of the daughters of the Indian king, was captured in the war and was taken as a prisoner from India to Nubia or to Abyssinia, to Habash. If we keep in mind and we understand the position and the historical reality that Allama al-Majlisi rahmatullah alayh has been able to provide for us, we are able to do jam' between these two historical positions that are given to us in regards to Sayyida Fidda. Notice over here, Ahibai, when it comes to vetting history, when it comes to accrediting and authenticating history, using or depending on a chain of narrators and on the sanad to authenticate history is a catastrophical error. And many times you will find, unfortunately, that people who do not have experience within the field of ilm al-rijal or diraya or the scope of rijal will come and reject historical realities based on the sanad. This is a grave error. History is not authenticated by the sanad. To a great part, the sanad may have some sort of supplementary role. But when it comes to authenticating history, we have what is known as qara'in, indications, and there is an entire science on understanding how to identify indicators, how to batch together these indications to be able to come to a conclusion of what is most likely the most accurate representation of history. And you find over here Allama al-Majlisi rahmatullah alayh shows us how this happens, that you have a tradition or a version of history that says that Sayyida Fidda is from India, and you have another historian that says she is from Abyssinia. Allama Majlisi is able to come and connect the dots between different historical events that happened, like the skirmishes and the wars between Abyssinia and India, and is able to establish for us that these hadith actually don't, or these historical narrations don't contradict each other. What happens is they are bridged together when you understand that there was a war that took place and Sayyida Fidda was brought as a prisoner. Having said this, she was brought to Medina, as we said, after the battle of Khaybar. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Tayyib, you are all familiar of the manner in which Rasulullah sent Sayyida Fidda as a servant to the house of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. While Sayyida Fidda was in the house of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, from the battle, after the battle of Khaybar, all the way up till the istishhad and the martyrdom of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, which was in 11 AH. From here on, Sayyidat Fidda had made an oath that she will continue to remain in the servitude in the house of Ali Muhammad, and upon the martyrdom of Sayyidat Zahra, she would perform the duties as a servant within the house of Sayyida Zainab alayha salam. You find that when we say that Sayyida Fidda was a servant within the house of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Ruhillah al-Fida, you will also now be able to understand that the relationship between Ahlul Bayt and their servants is not a relationship of what we think between an employer or an employee, or the slave and the owner of a slave. As you will remember from the Majlis of Imam Sajjad Ruhilahul Fida, the relationship of Imam Sajjad with the slaves was a relationship of tarbiyah. And you find over here that the most accurate relationship, the most accurate term that you can give to the relationship between Sayyida Fidda and Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra is that Sayyida Fidda was a student that lived in the house of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra. And from here, you will find that the effect and the impact of the tarbiyah of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra on Sayyida Fidda is that historians have mentioned she became a Hafidh al-Quran and the Mufassir of the Quran under the tutorage of Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. See, there is a difference when you learn tafsir al-Quran from a fallible person as opposed to when you learn the tafsir of the Quran from an infallible person. This is one. Number two, infallible person, ma'soom. So there is darajat. When it comes to tafsir al-Quran, there is darajat. You have a type, since we are on this topic, Bain al-Qawsayn, I point towards a concept and we move. Tafsir al-Quran, there are certain aspects of a tafsir al-Quran that are prohibited. Tafsir al-Quran, certain types of tafsir of the Holy Quran, rather than taking you towards haqq, they actually take you towards batil. Ajib. Don't be surprised. Quran has been used to establish batil. We've seen this with our own eyes. You look at the people who represented ISIS and Daesh. They did not use the Quran and use the apparent verses of the Quran to justify the killings and the bloodshed? Do you not see how the Nawasib used the Quran to justify the killing of the Shia? Do not be surprised that it doesn't mean that if a person comes up with a certain idea or a certain concept, and because that concept represents some of the verses of the Holy Quran, that he is on haqq. La. Tafsir of the Quran has rules, has regulations. And inshallah we will look towards this in closer detail when we analyze the Majlis on the personality and the infallibility of Sayyidah Zainab Ruhillah al-Fida. But you find over here that Imam as-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajjal faraja, comes forward and says, whoever performs the tafsir of the Quran through their opinion, من فسر القرآن برأيه فليتبوى مقعده في النار. The one who enters into the science of tafsir of the Quran and attempts to perform or interpret the Quran through his own whims, through his own desires, through his own opinions, he should confirm his seat in hellfire. The Quran is a divinely revealed text, is not a scripture that is open to opinion. This is not a scripture that has been revealed upon mankind such that it can form the basis of debates based on the limited intellect and the opinion that is derived from a limited intellect. The Quran is something much greater than this. Tanzilum min Rabbil Alameen. This tanzil from Rabbil Alameen cannot be the basis of human speculation. And you find that a majority of the Muslim Ummah has gone astray on the basis that they depended upon the limited ability of the intellect as an independent source of understanding the Quran. Most simplest example of this is the ayat of wudu. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. Quran says, wipe a part of your head. Yet when you look at the affairs of the Muslim Ummah, for masah, there is wiping of a part of the head, and there is washing of the entire head, and parts that are not even part of the head or the face. Yet the justification comes back to Quran. You find over here that independently attempting to perform the tafsir of the Quran in independence of Ahlul Bayt leads a person to Nar Jahannam wa bi'sal masir. You find that one of the greatest, Marhum Sayyid Habibullah Al-Khawi mentions, and has got a number of places where the Sufi school of thought actually went astray due to their interpretation of the Quran. Because what they would do is, there are certain schools within the Sufi theology that believe that Furu'ud-Din in terms of Salat and Saum is actually, Salat and Saum is a spiritual exercise for the people whose Iman is Naqis, whose Yaqeen is Naqis. And the idea is that, this is why they don't have Furu'ud-Din in Salat. They have a tariqah for their wird and so on and so forth. The way, the Ma'soom Imam has sent la'na on the school of thought. In any case, they have a tariqah. And the idea for them is that if a person has reached a certain level of yaqeen, if a person has reached a certain level of love of Ahlul Bayt, he doesn't need to recite Salat. Because he has reached a level of yaqeen. Ajib. Where is the dalil? They said the dalil is from the Quran. Hatta ataka al-yaqeen. Hatta ataka al-yaqeen. If it is translated in its superficial level, until they reach a point of yaqeen. Meaning what? Yaqeen is a stage. If you reach it, you are free from the bonds, or you are free from the quyud, or the restrictions of ibadat. If you come and you look at the Quran at its literal apparent level, yes, this is the conclusion you will come to. But when you come to the madrasa of Imam Sadiq Ruhi Lahul Fida, where he says, Hatta ataka al-yaqeen, meaning that salat is to be performed and this furu'ud-din cannot be abandoned until the point of death. Hatta ataka al-yaqeen, over here is death. When with full yaqeen, you will see how you cross from the realm of this dunya into the realm of the akhirah. The person who came and interpreted verses of the Quran, independent of Imam as-Sadiq, led an entire ummah astray by convincing them that salat is not wajib if you have yaqeen. وَلِذَلِكَ أَحِبَّائِ, be very careful where you take your deen from. If you have a glass of water, you think 50 times. You do not drink water unless it's from a pure stream. If for the nourishment of the body, we take care of our intake, that it has to be from a pure stream, then what about the nourishment of the soul? For tafsir of Quran as maratib, you have certain martabas, you have certain levels or certain type of tafsir by way of opinion. This is tafsir that is batil. You have tafsir of Ahlul Bayt. So, if we come back, our main topic, we were saying our main point is that Sayyida Fidda Ruhi Lahal Fida learned and was a tilmida, a student of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra. And she not only was she a Hafidh al-Quran, by the way, for 20 years of her life, she spoke nothing but Quran. To the extent that Waraka ibn Abdullah al-Azadi says that when he met Sayyida Fidda while she was on a journey onto Hajj, every question that he asked her, she answered back with an ayah from the Quran. Not only was she a Hafidh al-Quran, but she was a mufassir of the Quran. And what we are saying is over here, there is a difference when you learn the tafsir of the Quran from a fallible and when you learn tafsir of the Quran from an infallible. If you learn tafsir al-Quran from a fallible person, if this fallible person has taken tafsir independent of Ahlul Bayt, ila al-Jahannam wa bi'sa al-masir. If you have taken tafsir from a fallible person, and this fallible person has taken from a ma'soom, yes, there is a level of i'tibar. But still, this is a lower daraja of tafsir, as opposed to if you take tafsir from a ma'soom directly. Sahih? What if I was to tell you that the tafsir of a ma'soom, the ma'soom with all his grandeur as a divinely appointed imam who has wilaya takwiniya and wilaya tashri'iyya and ilmul ghaib from Allah, a ma'soom imam with his daraja as an Imam. To take tafsir from him is one thing, but to take tafsir from Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra is even greater than that. Why? Because we have Hadith al-Sharif. Imam al-Askari Ruhi Lahul Fida says, Nahnu hujjajullah wa Fatima hujjatullah alayna. That we are all the hujjas of Allah, the Imams. But Sayyida Fatima, she's a hujjah on the Imams of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For Sayyida Fidda is that lady who took the tafsir and the understanding of Quran from that woman who is a hujjah over the Imams of Ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajal. Ya Ali, we have within the world of Ma'arif the role of Mawlati Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra, the role of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra, and the ilm of Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam that is passed to every Imam, from Imam Hassan to Imam al-Hussein to Sajjad and Baqir and Sadiq and Qadim and Rida and Jawad and Hadi and Askari up till our 12th Imam. Each and every one of these Imams, the ilm of the Imam which has la hudud, has no boundaries, each and every one of this Imam, at one point of husul of this ilm ilahi, are dependent on Sayyida Zahra. There is great kalam, inshallah, if we have tawfiq, in one of the lectures of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra al-Fatimiyya, we show you the relationship of Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra in that she has been selected by Allah to be a wasita between the ilm of Allah and the ilm of the Imams. Sayyida Zahra is this wasita. This is something, this is not to be taken lightly. Ala kullin. Sayyida Fidda Ruhi Laha al-Fida, or Sayyida Zahra Ruhi Laha al-Fida, is the teacher of tafsir for Sayyida Fidda. So for Sayyida Fidda was a mufassir of the Quran. We understand one, her distinction. Number two, her second distinction in regard to the ilm of Sayyida Fidda. We have within our historical narrations that Sayyida Fidda was taught the science of chemistry by Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib Ruhi Lahul Fida. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Within Bihar it is narrated that when Sayyida Fidda came into the house of Amirul Mu'mineen and Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, as you know, they lived in a house that was the most basic of houses. In a house that was what you and I would consider as a house of poverty, with the most minimalistic of material possessions. So Sayyida Fidda, it is narrated, and you know many times, that the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, they went without food days upon days. This was something normal for them. So in one of these days, Sayyida Fidda narrates that I felt that I am in a house of difficulty with Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyida Zahra. Let me try and assist by providing some sort of relief for this household. So it is narrated that Sayyida Fidda previously, from her days as an Indian princess, had learned or was familiar with the science of chemistry and had knowledge as an alchemist to be able to change or convert copper elements into gold. So she performed this in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Medina. When Amir al-Mu'mineen came into the house, Sayyida Fidda showed this to him. And she says to him, Ya Abul Hasan, or Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, perhaps if you were to sell this in the market, we will be able to get some financial relief for the necessities and the food in the house. There is Imam Hassan, there is Imam al-Hussein, there is Sayyidah Zainab, there is Sayyidah Kulthum. Amir al-Mu'mineen smiled at her. Shufud, look at the dikka in this ibara. Amir al-Mu'mineen smiled at her. And he says to Sayyidah Fidda, if you were to change the concentrations, I'm paraphrasing of what is mentioned in the Arabic. If you were to alter the concentration of the solutions that you used to convert the copper, the gold would be purer and higher in the market value than what you have brought. Sayyidah Fidda looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen and she says, and do you know this science? Fidda is surprised. She's asking Amir al-Mu'mineen. And you know, at this time, this sort of chemistry and the secrets of chemistry were restricted to the people who were elite, which is why we are of the opinion that when Allama Majlisi comes forward and establishes the fact that Sayyidah Fidda was an Indian princess, and you go back into history and you understand that this aspect of chemistry, of converting precious stone into gold, was a knowledge that was restricted for the elite. Because gold was a currency at that time, and this sort of knowledge was not given to the arm. Hence, indicators, Karina, if you remember at the beginning of the Majlis, we said there are qara'in, there are indicators in history which allow us to authenticate or not authenticate. Truly, Jahil is somebody who depends on a sanad when it comes to authenticating history. But you find that she had this knowledge. So she looks at Amir al-Mu'mineen and she says to him, and do you have this knowledge as well? The history mentions Amir al-Mu'mineen smiled at her and he pointed at Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba was not more than 3 or 4 years of age. Amir al-Mu'mineen looks at Fidda and says, even Hassan knows how to do this. Point of contemplation. If you were to look present-day science will tell you that copper as an element cannot be converted into gold. Science as of today says that. What they do say is that there is within alchemists of the time of the past that yes, they would take elements of copper is a precious metal, and they would have these mixtures or these solutions with sodium zincate that would be used and poured and mixed with the copper and then treated under a certain degree of heat. And what you would have is something that looks like a gold-plated metal. What they do say is that the obsession of the alchemists of the past was trying to come up with sciences and discoveries to convert precious metals such as copper into gold. What we say is this, our position within the school of Ahlul Bayt. We do not reject hadith and we do not reject miracles just because science is not able to prove that. This science, this knowledge of changing or creating gold, we believe firmly that our Imams have this because the Quran says وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْسَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. And hence, ahibai, it becomes very important, crucial again as researchers, as people who seek ilm, as talibul ilm. It is important that when you read history and you analyze history, you will find this theme recurring over and over from the previous majalis. You have to, it is a grave error for a person who does not study Islamic history through the lens of Aqidah. You have to have your Aqidah mazboot before you authenticate or reject history. Person whose Aqidah is not mazboot, everything and anything to do with mu'jizat from Islamic history, they discard. So you find over here that in regards to the ilm of Sayyidah Fidda, in that in addition to being a Hafidhul Quran, in addition to being a Mufassira of the Quran, Sayyidah Fidda was an alchemist and was taught the secrets of chemistry by Amirul Mu'mineen. Because what this historical narration says is that Amirul Mu'mineen then taught her how to alter the concentration so that the gold that she's making is purer. But also keep in mind over here that Amirul Mu'mineen took a condition upon Sayyidah Fidda, that we do not use the secrets of our knowledge for our own personal gains. This is important. Tayyib, when it comes to the taqwa of Sayyidah Fidda, you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals within the Quran in Surah Al-Insan, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. And you are all familiar with this matamis, this incident where Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein were not in the best of health. So Amirul Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra made another that if Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein recover their wealth, that they will give away their iftar, or they will feed the needy. And you find over here the story or they are going to fast. Sorry, they made the nadar that they are going to fast. And as Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein recover, Amirul Mu'mineen, Sayyidah Zahra, Imam Hassan and Imam al-Hussein, to complete the nadar, they keep their fast. As the time of iftar comes and they are about to break the fast, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. On the first day, a miskin comes. At the time of iftar, knocks on the door of Amirul Mu'mineen and says, I am a miskin, I do not have food. Amirul Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra give their entire iftar. Hassan and Hussein also give their entire iftar. Like this 3 days in a row. One day they gave their iftar to a miskin, another day to a yatim, a third day to a prisoner. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the actions of Ahlul Bayt until these verses of Surah Al-Insan were revealed in their honor. Together with Imam Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, and Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra, historians from the Amma and the Khassa have also narrated that in addition to these 4 divine personalities, Sayyidah Fidda also gave her iftar away in charity 3 days in a row. And hence she is shamil in the fada'il of these verses of the Quran that are revealed in Surah Al-Insan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We have spoken about the descent, the ethnicity of Sayyidah Fidda, the ilm and the taqwa of Sayyidah Fidda. Number 3, certain historical events of dhulm that happened on Ahlul Bayt that Sayyidah Fidda was part of. And I want to mention for you 2 parts of dhulm that happened in the house of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Historians mention on the day of Saqifa, when the party of Shaitan usurped the rights of Amirul Mu'mineen, there was a number of companions who didn't give bay'ah. We have still few moments to masa'ib, but if you prefer to have the lights off, there is no issues. Khair, inshallah. When the party of Shaitan usurped the rights of Amirul Mu'mineen, there were a number of people who had stood with Amirul Mu'mineen and had not given the bay'ah. The likes of Miqdad, the likes of Salman, the likes of Abu Dhar, as we saw in the hadith a few nights ago. So the Fir'aun of this ummah goes to the Taghut And he says to him, your khilafah doesn't mean anything until and unless you get the bay'ah from Ali ibn Abi Talib. So they send Kunfudh. The traditions mention Kunfudh. You know, when they describe Kunfudh, if they say Rajulun Fadhun Ghalidh. Fadhun Ghalidh meaning heartless and merciless. Person who is so rough is inhumane in his behavior. The most inhumane person you could find in Medina was Kunfudh. So they sent Kunfudh to the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen such that he can bring back Amir to give the bay'ah. Kunfudh goes to the house. Sayyidah Zahra, who is commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take this mawqif, comes and stands behind the door. And she says, she turns Kunfudh away. And she says that I shall complain to Allah on how this ummah is treating us upon the martyrdom of my father. Kunfudh goes back to Masjid al-Nabawi. And he says to the Jibt and the Taghut that Fatima was behind the door, and she says that she is going to complain to Allah. At this point, Ibn Khattab says, and this is narrated in the books of the Amma and the Khassa, he stood up and he said, Ma lana walin nisa. What do we have to do with the talks of the women? In At-Tariq it is mentioned there were 300 men that marched to the house of Sayyidah Zahra. They placed firewood around the house. Not only was this door of Zahra lit on fire, but in Kitab Sulaim, Salman says that when he kicked open the door, Sayyidati Nisa al-Alameen got crushed between the door and the wall. Salman says, Zahra getting crushed between the door and the wall is one thing. He says, but there was a nail that was protruding from the... There was a nail that was protruding from the door. And this nail pierced the lung of Sayyidah Zahra. She fell down to the ground. And in the most painful manner, she cried out, Ya Abata, Ya Rasulallah. Rawi mentions that this la'in was about to turn away when he heard the pain in the cry of Sayyidah Zahra. He was about to turn away. But he himself says in his letter to Muawiyah, but then I remembered my hatred for what Ali ibn Abi Talib has done in Badr and Hunain. So I turned around and I kicked Fatima in the stomach. The Maktal says, فَرَفَسَهَا رَفْسًا شَدِيدًا. With all his strength, he kicked Sayyidah Zahra in the stomach. At this moment, the Maktal says, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, covered in blood, cried out, Ya Fidda Sannidini. Fidda, come and help me. Mohsin has become shaheed. Sayyidah Zahra did not call out to anyone except Fidda. And if you understand that she called out Fidda at that point in time to help her. This should allow you to understand what the daraja of fidda was. That Sayyidah Zahra, if she needed help, she would call out fidda. Sayyidah Zahra called out to fidda. One. Number two, Amirul Mu'mineen called out to fidda. Ajib wa gharib what Sayyidah Fidda saw in her life before Karbala. Maktal narrates, Maktal as in the historians or the history that speaks about the martyrdom of Sayyidah Zahra. When Amir al-Mu'mineen gave the ghusl and the kafan to Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, he placed Sayyidah Zahra in the middle of the house. And then he called out. He says, "O Hassan, O Hussein, O Zainab, O Kulthum, come and do your final wida to your mother." In this masa'ib, I want to show you what is the position of fidda. You understand the maqam of fidda, that Sayyidah Zahra, at that time of zulm shadid, at that painful, crucial time, she called out fidda. Look at when Amir al-Mu'mineen is calling out to Sayyidah Fidda for help. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to the children, come and say farewell wida to your mother. Hadith al-Sharif mentions that Imam al-Hassan went and threw himself at the shoulders of his mother. Imam al-Hussein threw himself at the feet of his mother. Imam Hassan is saying, "Oh mother, do not leave me." The hadith is saying Imam al-Hussein is holding the feet of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, is saying, "Ya Umma kallimini." He says, "Oh mother, speak to me. I am your son Hussein." At that moment, the hadith mentions Amir al-Mu'mineen cried out, "Fidda, come and take Hassan and Hussein. For indeed the malaika by the arsh of Allah are weeping for the tears of Hassan and Hussein." Hadith mentions it is Sayyidah Fidda who came and gently took Imam Hassan and Hussein and Zainab and Kulthum. It is Fidda who gave tasliyah to Zainab. And if you understand that Sayyidah Fidda wiped the tears of Sayyidah Zainab on the Shahadate of Sayyidah Zahra, you will also understand how Sayyidah Fidda wiped the tears of Sayyidah Zainab on Sham Ghariban. One of the ulama puts this very beautifully. He says, Sham Ghariban, Sayyidah Fidda wanted to wipe the tears of Zainab, but Zainab held the hand of Fidda. She said, "Fidda, today Zainab will not cry because Zainab has to be Abbas today. If Zainab cries, what will Layla and Rubab do? Zainab has to be strong." Mawqif of Sayyidah Fidda on Ashura. You've understood some of what Sayyidah Fidda did when Sayyidah Zahra was attacked. Sayyidah Fidda on the 11th of Muharram. Say, Ahibai, the majlis that is loved by Imam as-Sadiq is a majlis where the tears are mustamir. Tears roll throughout the entire majlis. It's not shart that we have to wait for masa'ib. Imam as-Sadiq says these majalis where the tears are flowing are beloved to me. Allah. In the Maqtal it is mentioned, you know, the body of Imam al-Hussein, it was not trampled once. Body of Imam al-Hussein was trampled 3 times. If you go back to Ziyarat al-Nahiya, Imam al-Hujjah says, when Imam al-Hussein fell from the Dhul Jannah, Before Shimr beheaded him, when Imam al-Hussein fell from the Dhuljana, he fell on the plains of Karbala. The enemies were circling around Imam al-Hussein with their horses. They began to trample on the body of Imam al-Hussein while he was still alive. The Maktal Imam al-Hujjah in the Ziyarah mentions that they were trampling the body of Imam al-Hussein, and Imam al-Hussein was holding on to the sands of Karbala, sometimes opening his fist, sometimes closing his fist. Oh, Imam Mazlum. This is the first time they trampled on the body of Imam al-Hussein. The second time they trampled the body, the second and the third time, is after they beheaded Imam al-Hussein. Umar ibn Sa'ad said, bring me 10 horsemen. 10 horsemen to trample on the body of Imam. Do you know, first they laid the body of Imam al-Hussein on his back. They laid the body of Imam al-Hussein on the chest. The Maktal says the first thing these 10 horsemen did is that they trampled on the back of Imam al-Hussein. And when they trampled on the back, Umar ibn Sa'ad said, turn the body over. They said, how do we turn it over? He says, whatever is remaining from the body, turn it over and trample on the chest of Imam al-Hussein. 3 times the Imam al-Hussein was trampled on the day of Ashura. Maktal mentions 11th of Muharram, when the women and the children are now being tied with ropes and have been taken prisoners. Umar ibn Sa'ad looks at the body, and this is found in Kitab al-Kafi. Umar ibn Sa'ad looks at the body and he says to his people, whatever is remaining from the body of Hussein, trample it again. There should not remain a single trace of the body of Hussein. Over here, Sayyida Fidda did dua. The details of this dua you can find in Al-Kafi, the circumstances. Sayyida Fidda did a dua for the body of Imam al-Hussein to be protected from the 11th of Muharram up till the time Imam Sajjad would come. The moment Sayyida Fidda raised her hands in dua, Hadith al-Sharif mentions that a desert lion appeared on the plains of Karbala. This lion came and sat by the body of Imam al-Hussein. When Umar ibn Sa'ad and his horsemen saw this, Umar said, this is the fitna and the evil and the black magic of Bani Hashim from the days of the past. And so the horsemen left. And this is the reason, through the dua of Sayyida Fidda, that the body of Imam al-Hussein was not trampled for a 4th time. Hadith al-Sharif mentions that this lion would roll and rub its head on the blood-stained sands of Karbala, weeping for Imam al-Hussein for 3 days. This is Sayyida Fidda, Ahibai. Masa'ib, I want to say to you only one thing. When the head of Imam al-Hussein was raised on a spear and was brought into Kufa, the head was brought into the darbar of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. The Maktal says, when the head of Imam al-Hussein was brought into the darbar, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad began to laugh and mock the head of Imam al-Hussein. So Ibn Ziyad said, send and parade the head of Imam al-Hussein in the market of Kufa. I want you to hang and parade the head of Imam al-Hussein in Kufa so that people should see that anyone who has sympathy for Hussein ibn Ali, this will be done to them. They said, this is the severed head of Imam al-Hussein. Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad said, humiliate the head by parading it in the market. The Maktal mentions that when they brought the head of Imam al-Hussein in the market of Kufa, the miracle is that the blessed head of Imam al-Hussein began to recite the Quran. So as the head started reciting the Quran, the people began to gather around the head of Imam al-Hussein in the bazaar. Some of them were asking, how can it be reciting Quran? Some of them began to say, what we have done was a major sin. This can only be a miracle that the head of Imam al-Hussein can recite Quran. The Maktal mentions the people went back to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. They said to him, oh Ibn Ziyad, over here the head of Imam al-Hussein is reciting Quran. We are scared that the people will have sympathy for Imam al-Hussein. What should we do? Do you know what Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad said? Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad said, whip the head of Imam al-Hussein until the Quran stops. The Rawi mentions that the army and Umar ibn Sa'ad came. The head of Imam al-Hussein was crucified, was placed on a palm tree. They began to whip the head of Imam al-Hussein. 5 men taking turns. The head would not stop. They mentioned that blood was dripping from the head of Abu Abdullah, but the Quran was not stopped. Matam Hussein.
میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. کیسا انصاف ہے تمہارا، کیا شریعت یہی سکھاتی ہے، حق یتیماں کا دبانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. نبی کی بیٹی ہو، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. کیسا انصاف ہے تمہارا، کیا شریعت یہی سکھاتی ہے، حق یتیماں کا دبانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں. قدر ظلم کمایا ہے مسلمان تو نے، میرے محسن کو مار ڈالا، گھر فقط ہی نہیں جلایا ہے، دل محمد کا جلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، کس قدر ظلم کمایا ہے مسلمان تو نے، میرے محسن کو مار ڈالا، گھر فقط ہی نہیں جلایا ہے، دل محمد کا جلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میرے بابا پہ ہے قرآن خدا نے بھیجا، اس کی تحریر پھاڑ ڈالی، اور ہنس کر سند کے ٹکڑوں کو یوں فضاؤں میں اڑانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، کل ایمان کی زوجہ نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، جھوٹ میں بولتی نہیں ہوں، مجھ کو جھٹلا رہے ہو منبر سے، دین کے کام چھپانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے نبی کی بیٹی ہوں، مجھے دربار بلانے والوں، میں تمہارے
یا حسین 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 رکدا نہیں کیا چو ہے خون مہاری دا 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 رکدا نہیں کیا چو ہے خون مہاری دا
शहादत है